All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi there, this is Tina Hagelin with InterDyn BMI. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know we're just a couple minutes past the hour. It looks like we have a good group of individuals online. There's a nice set of people, so I think it looks like everyone's joined. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Looks like I am, it looks like it is actually sharing my desktop. Can someone actually go ahead and, oh, here we go. Got it. Perfect. All right. So can someone actually in the chat just go ahead and send me a message to let me know that you can see my screen, and then I'll actually go ahead and start the PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll go through and begin building our roster today in SSRS.
Tina, this is Kayla Jo. Looks like everyone can see it, so thank you so much.
Perfect. Excellent. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my PowerPoint presentation. All right, so you are attending the iMIS SQL Server Report writing session today. So this is our one-hour webinar. I am Tina Hagelin. I'm the iMIS Practice Manager here at InterDyn BMI. We will be referencing a PowerPoint today, although we're going to jump in and actually do a live demonstration. So our goal is to give you a good idea as to how to, one, what tool you need to use depending on the version of SQL you're running. The next step will be to actually create a project. It's a little bit different using SQL reports if you've used Crystal reports. I think the concept is kind of the same as far as you have, where do you get the data from, where, what are my tables, what are my fields, that's kind of the same, but it's almost like you have to step back because we have to build a project out first. So once we do that, we'll go ahead and build a member roster report. And then once we have our member roster report, we're going to actually add that to our staff site. We're going to focus on our staff site today, but a couple of things I want to point out is any of these SQL reports that you create can actually be run from the staff site or from your public-facing website. So think about what if you wanted to build a receipt for individuals on your website. So member dues receipts, something special, maybe it's a transcript for certification. Those things are possible. So kind of think about that, so it's not only what you can do for your staff, but maybe for your members, because we want to really push self-service, right? I'm sure you get a ton of phone calls saying, hey, I need a year-end tax receipt. Oh, I lost this or I lost that. I have to send this to accounting so I can get reimbursed for the event I registered for. So some of those pieces could maybe be added to your website. This is the first kind of like step in SQL reporting. We're going to focus on connecting directly to the database today and then adding that member roster to the report. So we're really focused kind of on staff. We will actually offer another SQL reporting webinar later on that teaches you how to create a report such as like an event receipt, right? Where it will actually pass the user who's logged in. So if I'm on your public-facing website and I log in as Tina, and if I want to print a receipt, it needs to be smart enough to say, hey, Tina's logged in, only show Tina her information. So we will do a webinar, probably it'll be a couple months out. I think we have February's agenda kind of in the works already, but maybe in March we'll do like a second reporting. We'll kind of do, we'll try to do a few more in like a reporting series to kind of give you guys a good idea. The other thing I want to point out is don't forget these are all recorded and they're out on InterDyn's YouTube channel. So you can go to the InterDyn YouTube, and if you do a search for, iMIS SQL reporting or something like that, you should be able to find these and then reference them later too. All right, so let's go ahead and keep moving. So if you're used to using, even Microsoft Access or Crystal Reports, you need some type of tool to build the report, right? So with SQL reporting, if you're on older versions of SQL, so kind of before SQL 2014, you would typically use something called BIDS, or Business Intelligence Development Studio. So that's actually an option with your SQL media. I know typically you don't really see CDs any longer, but you'll have a download. In that download, one of the options when you actually go through the install is it will say Business Intelligence Development Studio, and it's just a checkbox. And once you check that, it will actually load this tool. So there's really no additional software purchase. And if you're on SQL 2014, which is typically if you're an iMIS 20, on the iMIS 20 version, a little bit later version, you're actually going to have, instead of BIDS, you're going to look for Business Intelligence for Visual Studio 2013. So that's not actually going to be on your SQL media any longer. It's actually a download from the Microsoft site, and that is also available to you at no additional cost. It's really just almost like part of the install. All right, so I'm going to keep going here. So these are the steps that we're going to cover today. So we're going to go into I'm actually going to scoot back because today I'm focusing on SQL 2014. I have an iMIS 20 install, so I'm going to go into my Business Intelligence for Visual Studio 2013. Right, so we're going to focus on that today. So we're going to use that tool, and then we're going to create a new project, and then we're going to go ahead and create a new report, and we're going to kind of go step by step. We add the report, we add the new item, and then after we have our report, which is kind of the shell, then we have to add the source, which is where the data comes from. And then we're going to add the data set. So we're going to say, hey, we're going to focus on maybe name and address information, right? So that's kind of like where our tables are. And then we're going to add the fields because we want to place our fields on the report, because if we don't have fields, it will just come back blank, right? So what we're going to do today is pretty simple, but it should give you a really good idea as to, how do you connect to the database? How do I create a data set? What does that look like? What's the level of effort to actually get this going? And then what we'll do is we'll save our report, and then we'll show you the step that is needed to actually take your report and get it loaded inside the staff site. One other piece I thought was kind of helpful, and we'll do this today too, is because I can run a member roster, but the next step you'll say is, well, how do I create a parameter? I want to ask, staff wants to be able to say, well, what member type? So we'll do that today too, because I think we'll have enough time to kind of get that in play. All right, so I think at this point I'll kind of stop, and we're going to go into our environment where we'll create the report. And then we'll circle back on these steps for, how we get it into the staff site, because I don't want to go too far without maybe showing you some information. All right, so I'm going to sneak out of my PowerPoint, and I'm going to go ahead and get into my environment. So what I've done, I'm actually going to back up because I think this is pretty important. So I'm just in this development, like a test environment. All of the data you're seeing today is kind of demo data, right? Dummy data. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have to go find the tool that I'm going to use to write my report, right? So here's my SQL Server Data Tools for Visual Studio 2013. So this is the actual, I did have to go through that download piece and get that onto my server. And it's going to launch Visual Studio for me. I may just show you a quick example of what the report will look like, although we'll probably make ours look a little bit prettier. But when you first come in, it will say, do you want to create a new? We'll do like File, New, and we'll do a new project. I'm going to actually open an existing project for a second and show you what the report looks like, and then we'll actually backtrack and then build it, so at least you have a little bit of an idea of what we're going for. So I have this recent project where it's called UG example, so it's just my user group example, kind of like our I try to build things out before we do these webinars so there's no surprises. I don't want to run into any issues. So this is kind of what my report looks like. Again, we'll actually build this from scratch, but when I preview it, so this is what we're actually going to build. So this way you'll have an idea of what we're doing. So we will do a parameter, right? So it'll say, please select the member type. And here we'll say, we're going to go after maybe a member individual. We'll go ahead and view our report. And you can kind of see I have a whole bunch of kind of junk in there, right? But this is kind of, this will be the end result. I know it's not gorgeous, but it kind of gives you an idea as to what it will take. All right, so that's what a report will look like. So now I'm going to actually close out of this project and we're going to backtrack and we're going to start from scratch. So now you have an idea of what we're building. So in here we're going to say File, New. We're going to click on a project because all of our reports will need to live inside of a project. Okay, so if you build out invoice reports, transcript reports, whatever reports, they have to kind of live in a project similar to maybe you're using Windows Explorer and you have a folder. It's kind of like that same concept. One thing, this is pretty important, so you might want to just jot a note down. So if you start to build out a report, you have all of these different options. I think when you first come in, it will actually default to the analysis services. And if that is selected, you'll think, okay, I'm going to start to build my project, and then you won't see any options for any of the reporting, and you'll be confused. So you'll want to make sure that you select the report server project. We do have a wizard that's available, but the wizard really just says, what's the next question? What's the next question? I could certainly show you that today, but I want you to actually know how to do this versus having the wizard just ask you a bunch of questions. But on your own, go ahead and use the wizard and see what you think. But today we're going to just build the report server project from scratch. All right, so now down here is your opportunity to name your project. So we're going to call this our my membership project, right? Call it whatever you want. And here's your location, right? It's going to default underneath this specific folder. One thing to think about is if you're on a server or if you're doing this from your workstation, you're going to want to make sure wherever you put this, it's being backed up, right? So right now this is defaulting to C users. I'm okay with that for now because I'm not too concerned about this report, but that's something to consider. I think when you first come in, the first time you're using this product, it will have this little checkbox selected to say create directory for solution. And what that will actually do is with your location, it will also do another folder called /membership project, and then it will put your project outside of that. So it's almost like it creates this extra layer. I typically turn this off because it just causes me to click one extra time to find my project. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK. It's going to go ahead and create our project for us, which is kind of a blank slate. I'm going to take a second here. I was just taking a quick look at the questions here just to make sure there wasn't something like I can't see.
I've got that covered for you, Tina. Nothing.
Perfect. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Kim. All right, so I'll keep moving on. Okay, so so before when I had said make sure that you're selecting that report server project, if you accidentally just kind of blew by that and let the default, when you come in here you wouldn't see reports under Solution Explorer and you'd be really confused. I would say if that happens, just kind of back out and start over and create a new project. All right, so under reports, so under the Solution Explorer, right, so this screen should show when you come in. Once in a while, I do notice the screen might go a little haywire or you're like, oh, I can't find the Solution Explorer, where did it go? One trick would be, let me see here. Here we go. All right, sorry. there's many, many versions, and my brain just can't keep it all straight anymore. But one thing you can do, if you're not quite sure if you're seeing everything on the screen or if you accidentally close something under Window, you can click on this Reset Window Layout, and it will bring these windows back for you. Okay? So don't be worried about, oh gosh, I closed something, I can't get it back. All right, another thing, if the intent is you will run these reports through the staff site or the public-facing website, we cannot use a shared data source or data set. The data source and data set actually has to be built into the report, and I'll show you that in a moment, but I do want to point that out because you're going to be tempted just to create maybe your data sources or data sets over here. If you do that, your report will actually run until you pull it into the staff site, and the staff site will say, oh, I can't find it, or you'll just get an error because it doesn't know where the data source is. The data source actually has to live inside the report, has to be created inside versus having it shared. All right, so under reports, we'll go ahead and get started. One thing with this product you'll notice is you have to right-click all the time, right? I think Crystal Reports was very similar in that way. If you click Add New Report, it will pull up the wizard. I tend to stay away from the wizard when I'm doing trainings because I really want to show you how do you create it without having to use a wizard, because you know the wizard's great, but it kind of does all the work for you, and then you never quite know where things actually live in the tool. So here we're going to go ahead and click Add, and we're going to say New Item because we're going to create a brand new report. I try to throw in nuggets here and there whenever I can, just to kind of let you guys know, well, what is existing item all about, right? Existing item would be, so maybe now we have our event invoice and your organization has used it for a while and everyone loves it. But they said, oh, can we just add one more field, just one more field, that would be great, right? So what you could do is come back into your project. If you still have that original report, it may have been a few years and you're like, I'm not quite sure where that report is anymore, or maybe you're kind of like, I don't know if this is the last version. What you can do is actually download the report from the staff site, and then if you put it on your desktop or in a file somewhere, you can actually click on this existing item and it would pull in that report so you knew that you had the most up-to-date version. So existing item just means I have a report and I want to bring it in here. Okay? Today we're going to focus on new item because we're going to create a new report. Again, tons of options here, right? Of course, Report Wizard would be kind of the easy way out. We're not going to do easy today. We're going to actually go through and build it from scratch. Our example today is a quick member roster, right? We're going to say, hey, show me everyone who is this particular member type, right? And we're going to go after maybe some name and address information. We'll kind of see how much we get through as time allows. So we're going to go ahead and click on Report, and I'm going to call this my member roster. One thing to note is you see that we do have a data source and a data set available here. This is going to kind of pop up later. And when you think about, oh, how do I get to my data sources? All right, let's go ahead and click on Add. What you'll notice is now we kind of have this blank slate. All right, one big difference between using SQL Reports and Crystal is Crystal was a little bit more forgiving in the fact that it would have already a place to put your fields. Well, because Visual Studio was a little bit more robust, there's so many things you can do with it, it needs to know you're actually going to build a report and we have to pull the table on first. We'll go through that in a moment, but first things first, we have to actually set up our data source. So we have this blank slate, but our report doesn't know where does the data live. We have to go tell it where is, where's the data we want to use today. So if we click on data sources, so here's the difference between this data source will actually live inside of this report, and if we use a shared data source, it means that we could have multiple reports running off the same data source, which is fine, but our staff site and our public-facing website does not like that option, so we're going to kind of steer clear of that, and we're always going to use the data source on the left. We're going to go ahead and right-click. Remember, right-click is your friend in this product. Create a new data source, and we're going to call it iMIS. Your data source can be called whatever you want. Traditionally, I just call it iMIS, because if someone were to look at this, they'd say, hey, we're pulling data from iMIS. You could say iMIS test, iMIS production, you know, whatever. So in this example today, we're pulling data directly from the database. There is an option that we'll go over here in a couple months. We're going to do like reporting series where you have the ability to use an IQA query as your source, and that will actually expect it to be iMIS. So it might be just be good practice to get yourself into the habit of always just calling it iMIS. It'll save yourself some trouble as far as having to remember, okay, what do I have to call it here if I'm doing this, or if I'm using this, you know, an IQA query versus hitting the database directly. All right, so the next option here is, you know, where's the data? We have this drop-down. We are using Microsoft SQL Server. Your databases actually live in SQL Server. And then we're going to go ahead and click on Edit because, of course, if we want to hit the server, it's going to have us authenticate. Wants to know what the logins and passwords are, right? The server I'm using today is, I have my SQL database and iMIS install. Everything is on one server. So you will most likely have to put in your SQL Server name. You could use the drop-down, and that will kind of help you give you a list to say what all servers can it talk to, and you know what's available to you, right? So because my SQL Server is on the box that I'm working on today, I could actually type in localhost, or I could just use a period, and the period actually means, hey, it's the server I'm on already, so I'm just going to use that trick today, right? And then we're going to want to use our SQL Server authentication. So whoever is writing reports typically will need to know the SA password or an SA equivalent. If you've set up like a reporting login and password, that's a really good, you know, depending on who's writing reports, we don't typically recommend you give everyone the SA password because a lot of power comes with that. So a reporting login and password will work just fine as long as they can read the tables. If you have any questions on how to set that up, just go ahead and send me an email, and I can kind of give you the once-over on what that means and what kind of information that user would need. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and plug in my password. You will want to click on the Save My Password. If you don't check this box, every time you go to preview, it will say, what's your password? What's your password? And it gets irritating. And then I guarantee the second report you create, you will make sure that that password will be saved. You can get back into the screen and check it later if you kind of forget. So it's not such a big deal, but it's a nuisance if it's not getting checked. Okay, let's see. The trick is the SQL password. Where are you? Okay, well, we might go back to that other report. Goodness, I wonder what happened. Well, that's not good. Well, plan B. So what we'll do is, because I actually have, oh, maybe that's my problem. I'm going to sneak back into my other project because I already have my data source set up. And we'll just create a new report unless I have my data source here. And of course, this guy should be working. I'm just going to double check. Ta-da! Yep, that's working. Interesting. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to close out of this and we're going to create our new report over here. There's our new report. And I'm just going to put a 2 behind it because I already have another one created. It's not going to let me use that data source. All right, we're going to sneak back here then. We're just going to delete kind of some of the stuff that we have. We'll start from scratch. All right, so what we've done here, I'm just going to kind of review this here quick. So under our data sources, we have our server, which maybe that was my issue before. Here's my login and my password, and once you have that saved, it should show you all of the databases that are available to you, right? So today I'm using my iMIS demo. You most likely have a production or a test. And once you have that selected, go ahead and click on Test Connection because we want to make sure that our data source can talk to the SQL Server. So once that's in place, we're kind of ready to go, right? We have iMIS can now talk to, or our SQL report can now talk to the server. So the next step would be to set up a data set, right? So a data set, you'll notice I have a couple in here already. But we're going to go ahead and build some additional ones, right? We want to go through this step here. So under the data set, again, you're going to right click and we're going to say add data set. So what a data set is, it's, so even though we can talk to the iMIS server, right, we need to tell it, well, what specifically do we want to go after? So maybe here we're going to say, we're going to go after member roster info. And again, the piece before I said we really don't want to use a shared data set because the staff site and the public-facing website does not like the shared data set or data source. So we're going to click on this second option that says use a data set embedded, right? So that's what these guys are, embedded in the report. So if we do the drop-down, we'll see our iMIS data source. We'll go ahead and click on that so it knows where to go, what database to go to. And then below, we're going to kind of use the text and we're going to go into this query designer. And the query designer allows us to see the iMIS tables, and then we'll start to say, well, what data do we want for this particular report? So if you've used Crystal Reports or even Microsoft Access, this WYSIWYG editor should look somewhat familiar because when you see the plus sign with this little, it's a table graphic, when you click on that, it will show you all of the iMIS tables, right? And you also have some SQL views and functions. Most likely you'll just be using tables. If you're a little more advanced, you'll start to use some views, and you can actually use a start procedure as your data set, although that's a little bit more advanced. Today we're going to kind of keep it simple. I'm going to go find my name table, and then maybe we'll go ahead and grab some address information as well. So we're going to grab name, address. So we're going to grab those two tables, and we'll go ahead and close this. So right away, you'll notice the software tries to be helpful and links our tables together, right? Which is okay. Most of the time it's right. In this particular instance, it's not right because if you know anything about the iMIS tables, you may know that each record in the database can have more than one address. If I left this link where it says ID to ID, and if I were in the database and both my home and work address were in this database, you would return 2 records for me, which in this case, probably not. I don't want that. Maybe I just want preferred mailing, right? I want whatever it is that Tina decided her preferred mailing was. So maybe that's my business address, right? I just want to avoid getting duplicate records back. So what I can do is actually delete this, and I know, and this is the learning curve, right? When it comes to reporting, it's kind of like, how do I link my tables together? What does this all mean? Some of it's a learning curve. There is a data, kind of a data model or a table layout booklet that actually will list all of the tables. And also on docs.imis.com, with the newer versions, just because there's so many more tables, you can kind of see that electronically out there. I do have a PDF version of the table layouts from older versions when they still actually put it in a PDF. It's still somewhat accurate, but that along with a data model, that kind of gets you some information to say, you know, how do these tables link together? So this particular link says I want to get the whatever address, this whatever records I'm pulling, right, it's mailing address. So this will guarantee that we'll only have one record returned back. So the next step is to decide, well, what fields do I want, right? And I can move some of these screens up and down, right, depending on, I just need more real estate on my screen. So I definitely want maybe the ID and the member type. How about the full name? Maybe a title, a company, right? So you can kind of go through the list and pick whichever fields you want. And then maybe from the address table, I want address 1, address 2, city, state, zip, you know, whatever it is. All right, so in here we could also kind of decide what the sort order may be. There's also another way to decide what the sort order is. Maybe in here, even though I won't show the last first in the actual report, I can determine the sort order will be based off of the last first. So the sort order, let me just make this screen a little bit bigger. This means this is the primary sort. Maybe I want to sort by last first, and if we happen to have 2 John Johnsons, then it could sort by company secondary, right? So if I run this right now, I don't have any filters. And a filter means I just said, hey, give me every record in the database. I haven't really said by member type or, you know, whatever, active records, inactive records. So if you notice, I have like 1,700 records right now. That's quite a few records. And you can see all these different member types, and we can see companies and so forth, right? So if we want to add a filter, there's 2 ways to do it. A filter is the same as a parameter, right? So those 2 words are kind of like interchangeable. I can add a filter and call it member type. And if I do that, it will automatically create it under parameters, and then we're going to tweak it. I'm actually going to call this one member type and give it a 1, because remember, I had an issue before and I couldn't quite get connected to my data source, so I already have one called member type, so that's why I'm kind of going with this member type and throwing a 1 after it. All right, so if I were to run this right now, look what happens. Oh, what's your member type? I can kind of see from my list here. I'll say, oh, give me all the MOs. So I just went from 1,700 records to about 2,000 records, right? So from here, we're going to go ahead and say, okay, because now I know that I have kind of the fields that I want, and I also have a parameter set up. You can always get back into here, because later on you'll start to build your report and you'll say, oh gosh, I forgot this particular field. So what you can do is, if you come in here and your data sets are collapsed, you can click on the arrow and then find your data source, right click, and then go back to the query and make changes, right? All right, so we're going to go ahead and look at our parameters, and we see, oh, there's our member type 1. That's the one we just created. We can go to the parameter properties. Remember, right-clicking, right? If you go over there and you just double-click, it will do nothing, and you always have to right-click. So right now it knows member type 1 is my prompt. Or member type, this is actually the name, but if you want a prompt that makes a little bit more sense to your end users, right, you can say, please enter member type, right? And then there's some other pieces where right now we're just going to focus on the 1 parameter, right? And we're just going to have 1 member type selected. You could do multiple. We kind of have to keep it simple today for the sake of time. But we're going to do this, and we're going to go ahead and click OK. The other thing, and I think I may just kind of edit this member type and show you this for the sake of time. I do have this additional data set called member type that I created. And the reason I created this is because most end users don't know what the codes are, right? They don't care that MO is, they may not know what MO is, they just know it's member organization. So if you go in and you add the member types table, this will actually give you the member type and the pretty description, because to an end user they just want the pretty description. They don't want, they're never going to remember what M or MO is, right, those different codes. So if we grab our member types table, so all I did here was come in here, add table, found member types. It's just a setup table, right? It's just a SQL table within iMIS that stores the member type information. I grabbed that and then I sorted the description, so this descriptions would look a little bit nicer when they're selected. They'd be in order. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And the thing that we can do once we have that data set is we can actually right-click, go to our parameters, go to available values, and we can say, hey, use a list. So whenever someone does the uses this particular parameter, it's going to look to the member type, and it's going to pass the right value, but it's going to show them the pretty description. All right, so now we kind of have our, we've had our data source, we have our data set, and we have our parameter. The next piece is how do we add fields, right? So over on the left-hand side, we need to go to the toolbox, and we have to add a table, because a table is how we can actually plug the fields in, right? So then once we have this table, we can come back to our member roster info and we can start dropping these fields in. Similar to if you've used Crystal Reports. And then this interface is pretty similar to Microsoft Excel, because you can click on the top and then insert, or you have the ability to, this takes a little bit of getting used to, but if you place your mouse in the right place, whoops, see, I didn't quite get it, but I think if you place your mouse, you can see where you get that blue line, it'll create that field for you. And then you can make these look a little bit nicer. I'm going to grab this row, bold. So a lot of this looks, it's a Microsoft product, right? So some of these things, if you use Word, they should be familiar to you. And then the other thing from the toolbox, maybe we want to add a, if you use this text box, it will allow us to add in, you know, my roster report. Right, this is kind of our page header. And then under the built-in fields over on the left, we can say, here's our page number. Right? So if we preview this, it's not gorgeous, but it'll give you a good idea of what it looks like. I have two. Let me sneak back here for a moment. If you have multiple parameters, it will actually show you both, because I do have this referenced in this other guy here, which I'm going to remove. It's causing me a little bit of headache. And then I'm going to remove this guy too. So let's go ahead and preview this. Let's run this and see what it says. So that one's happy. Oh. One thing I want to point out is you'll notice when I'm building out this report, there's this little star that hangs out in the corner, right? This means you haven't saved recently. Watch what happens when I save. Once I save, it goes away. Okay, so I'm going to run this, and it was screaming here a second ago. It says, hey, you have a query parameter called member type that it doesn't know about. Because I mistakenly, in my data sets, shame on me, I deleted it and I didn't really mean to. So we're going to create it real quick.
And while you're doing that, just want to mention there's one question in the queue, but if you've got questions that you'd like to ask Tina at the end, type those in and we'll make sure we get them addressed before the end of today's webinar.
All right, so we're going to wrap this piece up here in a moment, and then we're going to add our report to the staff site and show you an example of that, and then we'll go ahead and take questions. I know we're kind of coming up on the end of our time, and I'm very conscious about kind of where we're at. Let me just go ahead and get that going. Member type. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. Let's see. So, well, we might just decide we're going to go with my example that I have. So anyways, we'll just pretend that that's working. I don't want to troubleshoot it and take too much more time. But so what's going to happen is we will end up inside of your project, right? So wherever this project lives, and if you forget, right, you can always go back to this project solution, and it kind of says, oh, it's under Visual Studio projects, right? So this particular area, we need to know where that report lives. So as you start to create reports, it's going to build out within this project all of these different files. So you need to find your actual report where it lives. So this member report.rdl, it's all about this RDL file. If you're used to using Crystal, it's going to be an RPT file, but it's the report definition file because that's what the staff site is going to want. Okay, so that's what the staff site wants. I've actually placed a good working copy of what we did on my desktop, right? So the next piece is you're going to go out to your staff site, and I actually have this user group staff site that it's just my demo environment, right? So it's an environment that has, you know, the demo data, right? So I'm going to go ahead and log in as Brian M, which is kind of a super user. All right, so this is my UG staff site. So typically when you do a RISE implementation, you'll have a staff site, or you actually have a staff site you've created specifically for your organization. So it might be your acronym of ABC staff, or, you know, whatever it is. But the piece that we need to do is underneath RISE over on the left navigation. Depending on your version, your navigation may be across the top. You could still create reports. That's just fine. I'm just on a little bit later version of iMIS 20, so mine might look just a little bit different from yours, but the capability is still there. So what you want to do is underneath the RISE and then document system. So we have to have a way to get that RDL file loaded, right? So underneath the document system, I actually have a folder I've created. So you'll probably want to figure out, you know, best practice, have a folder with your name on it. I have this iMIS user group, right? And you'll notice that I've already loaded it, but I'll kind of go through the process to show you what I did. So underneath new, this little arrow, the little arrow that's super small that everyone is like, oh, where is it? I can't see it. It's a little black arrow. right? And then what you're going to look for is this report services template. And when you click on that, it will allow you to go upload your file. So that's why it was important for you to know where that RDL file lived. So you'd browse all the way to your project and go find it. In my case, my good copy is sitting out on the desktop here. So I'd have this guy here. I'd double click it and I'd load it up. Okay? I'm not going to do it again because I've already done it. And then you'll end up with your, your member RDL report, right? So now you have the report loaded in, but you have to actually have a content page that it lives on, right, to show it. So then the next step would be to go over to Rise, Page Builder, Manage Content. Again, kind of best practice, you'll probably have a folder that you're storing information in. You go ahead and say New Content Item, or Web Content, right? I'm actually going to open this guy up because the only thing that's on here right now is the report, although you could, if you're familiar with a content management system at all, you could add a piece of content that gives a description, like the HTML content, to say, hey, here's your, this is a place where you can run your invoices from, here you can do this or that, right? But the piece that you care most about is how do I get that report loaded onto my content page? So if you go ahead and click on Add Content, you're going to go under Utility, and you're going to scroll all the way down. There's actually two options for reports. You have a report display and an SSRS report. The one that you want is this SSRS report. You'll double click it. I'm actually going to click cancel at this point, and I'm going to go into the configure so you can kind of see what one looks like once it's configured. Because when it opens up, it'll show you report display, you'll give it a name, you could add a title. This is where you'll go select to say, well, where is that RDL file that we uploaded in the document system? So this is where you would go. So this whole best practice about keeping, what folder is it in, right? Oh, here it is, right? We grab that, double click it, and then it would load up. And then you have some questions you have to answer, right? One key piece is because we have a parameter, we have a member type parameter, you must check this box or it will never ask the staff, what's your member type? You'll kind of, once you go run it, you'll know right away to say, oh yeah, I forgot to do that. But once that's checked, it will ask. So we'll go ahead and say okay here. I'll actually just X out. I'm going to X out of here. You'll go ahead and save and publish. You could add anything else to this page if you want. You could end up kind of changing the layout so you have two reports running, or maybe you have a report landing page that then references a bunch of reports. The very last piece would be, we've added the report, we have it in a content item, but now you have to decide, well, where are they going to run it from? In my example today, I just have a side navigation called UG Reports. You could have a whole reporting area and they could expand it, and you could have 20 different reports, or a landing page, and then they run it from there. But in order for it to show up here, we do need to put it on the sitemap. So underneath Site Builder, Manage Sitemaps. Remember, in this area, we have access to all of our different websites we have running, so I want to make sure that I select my UG staff. And then here, if you do New Website Navigation Item, and then this is where I actually put in UG staff, and then in the select, this is where you'd go find your content record. So there's my content record, my member roster. So I'd click this and away we go. Although I already have it, I've done that here. So we're going to go ahead and just run it so you can see what it looks like. So if you click on UG Reports, it says, hey, please select your member type, and then in here, you'll notice this might be a little bit different list than the other ones because I'm running it against a different database. Any SQL report, if you can actually run it against test or production. So if you load it in production, it will run the production data. If you run it in test, it'll run the test data. So you don't have to have multiple copies of the report. But then here, maybe I select associate member. We'll go ahead and click on refresh. Although I don't think this report is as beautiful as the one that we created, but it should give you a good idea. So here's our member report, right? ID, member type, full name, company. We could, of course, make this look much better and gorgeous. There's another option, actually, I forgot to turn it on, is it would show a little PDF icon. You could click on that, and then it would allow you to download this as PDF. So if you had invoices that you were allowing members to run, they could do that. Okay, so I think at this point I should turn it over for questions because I think we have about 8 minutes left, and I want to make sure I can address any open items.
All right, so on the right-hand side, you should see a question area, and we will ask questions. All right, what if the report data tab is not visible? How can we get it to display?
If the report data tab is not visible, let me go back in here to make sure so the report data tab is not visible. So what happens is you will not see it in this particular version. In previous versions, just so you know, SQL 2014 is a little bit different because, let me go back in here. So under the Solution Explorer, once you actually select a report, it will automatically appear. So that's SQL 2014. If you're using something a little bit older, if it goes away and you cannot find it, you can try the Windows reset, and if that doesn't work for you, I believe under View, and it's not in this, oh, there we go, it is actually in this version, View and then Report Data, and it will show up. Hopefully that answered your question, and that is actually something that people ask on a regular basis, so that was a really good question.
All right. You know, one of those things that keeping current will help you get additional benefits, so that's cool. All right, Connie asked the questions. How do you have to put the fields in, do you have to put the fields in a table, or can you place them where you want them?
That is an excellent question. The data does have to go into a table if it needs to return multiple records. So if you had activity data, you definitely need to put it into a table because you would show like all the dues information or all the events the person has attended. But if you are just looking to add like an address for the person and it's just the one address, you can, I'm actually going to close that for a second, you can actually put in, you could add a field here, and it just says, the thing is it looks goofy because it says expression or EXPR, so it's hard to tell what the field is. You can always right click it and go into the text box properties, and then it will kind of say, oh, it's full name 1, but you do have the ability to do that. But if you place it on there, it will only return that data one time. Okay, so the table really allows it to like cycle through all the records and produce all the data. So that was a really good question.
All right, no other questions in the queue. Are there any other good questions that you can think of that maybe giving the answer would be helpful?
I would actually be interested, because I feel like it's the right audience, how valuable you feel like these types of trainings are, and if we do kind of the build on this to say, okay, now we're going to do a step 2 and a step 3. You know, now we've covered, you know, parameters, how you say enter a member type. So maybe next time we build another report, or we even start with the report we have and then add in parameters to say, how can I add more than one member type? So we say we want associate and a company, or, you know, whatever that is. I'd be kind of curious, because we had a pretty good turnout for this particular webinar, so that's why I'm kind of posing that question.
You bet, especially if people like SQL, it's always fun to learn how to do reporting better. Here's another question. So again, you can go in and answer her question on that. Here's another question. Which file do we attach to the staff site? I see 2 files in the project. One ends in SIN, and the other one ends in RPT-PROJ.
Actually, it's neither of those. We want the one that actually ends in RDL. So let me see if I can find that particular, I'm going to show it on my screen. So I'm just going to go to my most recent places and kind of cheat. So here's my project, right? And in my project, there's all of these different files within the project, right? I think you reference SLN and project. You care about the RDL files. That's the RDL files is what the staff site will want you to upload.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Good. All right, thank you so much. And again, you're getting a lot of kudos and high fives here that they are finding this very valuable. So thank you so much for sharing your talents and this insight. And again, do get in touch with our team here on iMIS installation training because we've got one of the best in the nation on this, and they're ready to help you. So last words before we let folks go?
One thing I would like to say, if anyone is interested in going to NIAG this year, it's in New Orleans in May, and I will actually be doing a one full day training session there. Just as a heads up, so if you're, it will be full of good information.
Excellent. So thank you. All right.
I think there was one, it looks like there's a quick question here from Susan that says, I am needing to build a report that shows more financial data. Can I use the same report builder for this? And the answer is yes. One thing I want you to know about this this tool is it's not only unique to iMIS, right? Like you can use that for iMIS. You're going the trans table. There's an actual SQL table called trans is where you're going to find the financial data. But if you have Great Plains, which is also SQL based, you could actually use Great Plains as your data source, and you could use it to build Great Plains reports and also iMIS reports. So if it's SQL based, and SSRS isn't even strictly for SQL, I think in the data sources I kind of showed that drop down, and there's many different options, but it's a great tool. There's lots of uses for it. So.
Yep, very, very true. And SQL people on the line here are smiling because they're probably using it every day all over the place.
Right, yep.
All right, Tina, thank you so much again. I appreciate it. And everybody, have a great day. We'll talk to you soon. Come back next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.